Hello, Johnny London here again, and today I want to talk to you about solar panels. Now, I've had a few requests to make a video about my solar panels. A few of you have spotted that I've got quite a lot on the roof, and so that's what I'm going to do. It's likely to be a slightly long chat. I'll do my best to edit it down to keep the salient points, but let's get into it. Okay, so when you go to put solar on your boat, the first thing you need to decide is what kind of panels you want. Now that's easy. There are two kinds. There are polycrystalline and monocrystalline. Now the only difference between them is the polycrystalline ones are a little bit cheaper, a little bit less efficient and a little bit larger. Let's say there's a 10% difference on all those parameters between those and the monocrystalline. Now what I would say is don't worry too much, just get whatever you can get. Have a look to see what's available near you, what prices you can get things and what sizes will work with the space you've got available to you, and just go off that. You know, if there's a guy down the road knocking out panels for 90 quid each and they look like they're going to fit you just fine, just get those. The other thing to mention is there are flexible panels, and these can be stuck down on the roof and they'll follow the curve of the roof and you can walk on them. I haven't had any experience of these. I wouldn't like to try them because I don't fancy walking on them. I think that if you've got stones trapped in the treads of your boots or what have you, you're probably likely to damage them, and they're not something I've investigated because they're also quite expensive. Now if you've got a traditional boat, I can understand that they might be just the thing. They'll keep a very low profile, people will hardly notice them and it won't detract from the look of the boat. Now for the rest of us, power is the name of the game. Now if you live in a marina all winter and you cruise most days when you're out in the summer, you're probably not going to need a lot of solar. A couple of panels, 300 watts, 500 watts in total maybe, and you'll probably be perfectly happy. But for the rest of us, the liverboards, the continuous cruisers, people that are out on the cut all year and people that want to maybe spend a couple of weeks moored in a nice spot away from everybody, you need as much power as you can possibly fit onto your boat. That's what I would say. Now, I know a lot of people use the roofs of their boats for controlling the boat when you're locking and so on and so forth. And I was concerned about this when I started fitting solar panels because that's what I'd been doing. Before I had any panels, I used to hop up onto my gas lockers, hop up onto the roof, and then it's quite easy to get off the boat. You only need the last couple of steps on the lock ladder if it's a deep lock, and if it's quite a shallow lock you might just be able to hop straight off onto the bank, so that's good. Having said that, I think in wet weather you're probably on balance better off not going on the roof really, because if you do slip off of there, you know, you're going to bang something on the way down and that's obviously not good, especially if you're on your own. So I initially bought some panels that were of a size, they weren't too wide, and I put them down the middle of the boat. So I thought I'll have my panels there, and there's about 18 inches either side left that I can put that sort of black stick down grippy strip on, and I can walk along there, and you know, that'll be a good compromise. Now before I got as far as putting any black grippy strip down or anything like that, I found that I didn't much like walking along those edge strips because you're on the curve of the boat, so it's slopey and it wasn't really wide enough, and I thought if I do slip I'm likely to fall onto the panels and break them. So I just got into the habit quite quickly of using the gunnels. So I don't go up on the roof at all now, haven't done ever since I put those first couple of panels on and tried it out for a bit, and I don't miss going up there one bit. Okay, sometimes you've got a few more rungs on the lock ladder that you have to climb up out of if you're single-handing and you need to move from the boat that's in the bottom of a lock, you know, to get up onto the bank to control the boat. But by and large, it's not much of a sacrifice. Everything on a narrowboat's a compromise. You know, you do this, you lose that, you have this, you can't do that. I mean, that's just how it is. And for me, this isn't going to be for everybody, but for me, I'm quite happy to say I'll cover my roof in solar panels, I'll never walk up there again, and I can use the gunnels and it's not an issue. And that's what I've been doing as I've gradually added more panels every season. The roof's now full up with them and I don't miss going onto the roof one bit. You might want to save some of your roof for storage. I can well understand that. People have roof boxes or similar things like that. And one other alternative is if your boat's not too tall, you can use decking, which a lot of people do, to make a frame, obviously cut curves into the pieces of decking that run across the roof, you know, so that it fits the profile of the roof, and then you use the solar panel itself, hinge it and do it as a lid. Now that's best of both worlds, isn't it, really? You've also got the option of, if the sun happens to be over there where your hinge goes, you could, you know, angle your panel to get a little bit more out of the sun, but I'll come to that in a minute. So let's say you've found some panels, they're either poly or mono, it doesn't matter, and you've had a look at your roof and you've worked out what panels can go where. So that's an important thing to do, actually. Make a plan of your roof and do check that everything's going to fit. You know, if you have to start moving mushroom vents around or flying saucer vents around or whatever, you're going to turn it into a disproportionately hassly sort of job, really. Now, the next thing is how you're going to mount your panels. Most of these panels, the rigid panels I'm talking about, come in an aluminium frame, and that's reasonably sturdy. You've got three choices. You can use the plastic bracket sets that you can get, and those come with really nice sort of rounded corner mouldings that go into the four corners of the panel, and I think you get like two supporting ones for the lengthways of the panel as well. I think they're about sort of 30-40 quid a set, so it's not a cheap way of doing it, but the advantage there is you're not going to catch your centre line on your panel corners that could otherwise be sort of jutting out, you know, so they've got advantages and they look nice and they're quite low profile as well. Another way of doing it is to use the triangular ones, the triangular mounting kits that you see around, which give you the option to angle the panel either way like that, and I think because they've got slots in the triangles themselves you can sort of get a little bit on them lengthways as well. I'm not keen on those because they're quite a high profile, and if you've got a tall boat, and I do have a tall boat because it's a modern boat, you're going to run into problems, you know, with low bridges. So for me, it was all about getting the most low profile solution that I possibly could, and I also think that enhances or less detracts from the overall look of the boat. Obviously curved stick down ones are going to be almost unnoticeable. Rectangular aluminium frame panels mounted very low profile aren't going to look too bad. Interestingly, the sort of narrower width ones that I started with suit the boat very, very well, and I don't think they detract from it whatsoever. I've also got some of the wider ones, and okay, yeah, you know, it's solar panels, but it's a good trade-off for me because they give me power. So okay, so the way I mounted my solar panels is not with the expensive but quite nice low profile plastic bracket kits just because they were expensive. It's not with the triangle ones that you can adjust because they're too high profile. I just went to Screwfix, bought a big packet of galvanised or zinc plated, what have you, just normal little brackets, and just drilled holes in panels, screwed the brackets on or bolted the brackets on, and that gave me a very nice low profile sort of finish for the panels. You need to make sure that where you're putting your panel, the wider your panel is as it gets to the edge of the boat, the higher your bracket would need to be to make the panel clear the curve of the boat, but I'm sure you can work that out if you're going to have a go at this at all. Now the next thing is, how do you fix your brackets to the boat? You know, regardless of whether you've gone for the triangle ones or the nice plastic ones or my sort of cheapo version, you've still got to fix the brackets to the boat somehow. Now a lot of people would say, you know, mark them out, drill a hole into the ceiling of the boat, the roof of the boat, and tap that out so you've got a nice thread in there, and put a nice little bolt in there, and you know, then Sikaflex that all round or silicone it all round, what have you, to make it waterproof. I'm not in favour of that personally, because I don't like having holes in the roof of my boat. Sooner or later those holes are definitely going to fail. Might not be this year or next year, might be 10 years, but one day you'll look up at your ceiling, you'll go, oh, I've got a horrible damp patch in there, and you'll pull all your ceiling down to have a look, and you'll find that the bit that you did years and years ago has all gone rusty and manky, and it's all leaked and everything's gone mouldy and horrible. So for me, I just stuck my brackets onto the roof. I just scuffed up the paint a little bit, put some silicone on, and just laid the bracket on already connected to the panels, so everything was around it. Splodge, left that for a couple of hours, set, good as gold. I've had no trouble with any of them whatsoever, and I know they're never going to leak. And here's a look at the panels on the roof of my boat. The first two are polycrystalline, 150 watts each and fixed with aluminium brackets. We pass my dual centre lines to the next two panels, which are monocrystalline, 160 watts each and fixed with the basic galvanised brackets. The last two are wider 250 watt panels and I've set them with the galvanised brackets a little further in. Okay, so you've got your panels, you've got your brackets and everything's in place. The next thing you need to worry about is your cabling. Now luckily, cabling is very straightforward, it's universal. You can go on eBay or anywhere you like and you can look up solar cabling and it's called MC4. That's the name of the connectors on the end of the cable, and the cable also comes in a particular sort of double insulated style or something. It's just a black cable. You get different gauges, typically 6mm, 8mm. I'm not going to go through all the maths with you, but if you're doing a long run, a very long run of cable from one end of the boat to the other, to reduce inefficiency so you get less loss from the resistance of the cable, if you go for a slightly wider diameter, you know, that'll help, that'll save you a little bit of power again. But typically 6 or 8mm is probably going to do you for a couple of panels. Now, when I buy my cable, what I like to do is, after I've measured and I know how much I want, and after I've allowed a couple of extra meters, because when you get to the end of the cable and you start running around all the little snickets in your cupboard to get to where you put your controller, you always use a bit more than you think you're going to have needed. What I like to do is I order a cable twice the length of what I want, and it comes with a male connector on one end and a female connector on the other end. I then cut it in half, and then I've got two cables with the connectors already on, so I don't have to buy connectors and a crimp gun and start mucking about like that. Now, all panels that I've seen come with MC4 connectors ready to go. So let's say you're putting one panel on, you've got a male and female on a fly lead from your panel, and you've got a male and female from the cable that you've just cut in half. Those go together. You run your cable down to the other end of the boat to your MPPT controller, and then you've got bare wires that needs, so you just strip the cable and put the wires in. Okay, so that's just a little tip to save you having to waste time buying crimp machines and what have you. Now, how do I run my cable? Now, a lot of people say to you the thing to do is to go and get you can buy like a gland. It's like a thing, you do a square hole and you stick this little nice sort of covered looking box onto your ceiling, your roof, and it's got two little holes for the cable, and you put the cable through and that does up all nicely, and that's got like a nice little soft rubber things around, and you stick that all down, everything's fine. But again, 10 years later, everything's rusted and it's probably all going to leak. So what I do is I put my cables in through the mushroom vents. I don't know if you can do that with flying saucers. I haven't got flying saucer vents, but I'm guessing you probably can. Now, with mushrooms, the good thing about these is where the hole is for the air, it's under the mushroom. You've got like a pipe and the mushroom over that. So when you go to run the cable has to go up a little bit to get into the mushroom. And that's perfect, because that means any water that's tracking on the cable won't be able to come up and ingress into the boat. So that's a good reason for doing it that way. The other thing is that once you've put the cables into the mushroom vent, you know, screw the top back on, what have you. I mean, what difference is it going to make? You know, you've got quite a large area for air to flow through. I don't think two 8mm cables is going to have any impact on the amount of air that you've got flowing, and the hole's already there and it's going to be good and waterproof. You know, what's not to like? Keep it simple and effective. Right, next thing. So running the cable, I pull the cable all the way through the mushroom vent, so I've got a big pile of cables sitting in the boat. Now, that's fine. If that's where your MPPT controller is going, you're done, aren't you? But probably it's down the other end of the boat. So you go to your next mushroom vent and you take the cover off inside the boat. I have to mention, obviously, there's air vent cover things, you take those off as well. Then all I do is I'll get a stick. I had a bit of beading lying around last time. You could use a bit of thin plastic or something. Push that stick up all the way through from that mushroom vent to the one you've got your cable. Bit of tape on the end. Pull the cable through the ceiling to the next mushroom vent. Get all the cable through, gathered down there. If you've got further to go, repeat the process. Next mushroom vent undone from inside. Stick through. tape it onto the cable, pull it along and through. Now I found this worked really well for me. Obviously you've got a gap between the inner ceiling of the boat and the roof of the boat, and also on the roof of the boat you've got foam insulation, but there's still a reasonable gap. There are going to be obstructions from time to time, and I didn't know if it would work until I tried it, and it might not be the case that it'll work on all boats. It's going to depend a little bit. Now on a couple of occasions I couldn't get the stick through or couldn't pull the cable back, something was getting bound up on something, but I found with a little bit of perseverance, if I just sort of moved the stick or jiggled differently or took it out and ran it again, eventually I got the cables through, and it's made a really neat job. And I've done that on 2 or 3 occasions because, as I said, I've fitted my solar panels in stages. The first ones I did were at the stern of the boat, so I didn't have a very long run to do. That was easy, but progressively I've gone down to the other end of the boat. I've got cables all the way from the bow right down to the stern, so I've really had to run the full length of the boat, and I managed to do it. You know, even though there's a few cables in there now, and obviously the more cable you put, the more chance of something getting bound up, I did manage. I think I had to pry the last little bit of roof down right at the end where the cupboard was, and 1 or 2 other little bits of jiggling about like that, but it was doable, and it looks really neat, and I didn't need all kinds of funny fixtures and fittings and one thing and another, so I'm really happy with the way that went. Okay, next thing, controllers. There are 2 kinds of controllers, MPPT, which are the ones that you want, and PWM. It just means maximum power point tracking and pulse width modulation. The PWM are slightly older technology, and they're 15 to 30% less efficient. Obviously you want to go with the most efficient controller. There's plenty of them around, and you've got a choice. You can go El Cheapo, some unbranded Chinese thing which may or may not work. Do your research, pay your money, take your chances. Or you can go for the next thing up, which are the Tracer ePever controllers. I've got one of those. Now this company's been around for a few years. They're quite well known to boaters. You'll see lots and lots of them on eBay, and they do a range of other bits and pieces, like a Bluetooth adapters and external displays for the controllers and a few other bits and pieces. I think they're a fairly safe bet if you don't want to spend too much money but you want to get something half decent. They're the ones I've got, and I'm not displeased with them. After that you go up in price a bit. You've got your Sterlings, and then possibly at the top your Victrons, but I'm sure someone will correct me on that. There's probably other ones as well. So there's really prices to cater for all pockets, and there's no reason at all why you shouldn't be able to get a decent MPPT controller in your budget. Now the MPPT controllers have 2 parameters that you need to concern yourself with. One's voltage and one's current, or you might see this expressed as watts. You're going to need to do a little bit of Ohm's law here. I'm not going to cover that with you. If you think back to your school days, you've got V equals IR and you've got P equals IV. You can rearrange those formulas, so if you know your watts and your current, you can know the other thing, and let's not get bogged down in that. It's a long enough video already. So you need to, having decided what panels you're going to buy and having bought them and having fitted them onto the roof, you're going to know exactly what your maximum power is that you're going to ever put out. So you need to make sure that your controller is able to take the maximum power. Now controllers can dump power. So if you had a 500 watt array of panels going into a controller, it may say to you the maximum power I can deliver to the batteries is 300 watts, but I'm happy to take in 500 watts and I can dump the rest. You would say to yourself, well, why wouldn't I want one that is capable of putting all that power through and giving me everything? Well, a lot of the time it doesn't matter. Solar power isn't about maximum power. It's about getting something more of the time. A lot of the time your batteries are going to be nearly charged and you're going to have tons of solar on a sunny day, and they're going to be just sipping a couple of amps each and no more, even though the capacity of your solar array is hopefully quite substantial. So if you've got a controller that is happy to handle the amount of current that your panels could deliver, then you're safe. You know, it's not going to blow up on a sunny day. It doesn't matter if you don't necessarily see all that power being put through, as long as the controller can cope with it. Now, the next thing is obviously not just power, there's voltage to concern yourself with. Excuse me a moment. Oh. Well, if you're stuck with me, good on you. So the next thing to concern yourself with your MPPT controller is voltage. Now, obviously it's going to turn whatever voltage you've got at your solar panels into the correct voltage to charge your batteries properly. Now, it may have a little bit of an algorithm going on in it, so sometimes it might be putting out 14.4 volts and sometimes it might be putting out 13.6 volts, or you know, whatever you've set it to regarding what type of batteries you've got. But crucially, solar panels can put out a lot more than the nominal 12 volts. Now, one panel is likely to put out 22 volts or 30 something volts, depending on the size of the panel. So already you can see the controller's got a bit of work to do. It's got to sort of narrow that voltage down, bring that voltage down to the right range for the batteries. Now, you can wire your panels in series or parallel. If you wire them in series, the voltage rises. So let's say I've got 3 panels, they're all 22 volts each, maximum output power, that's what you've got to consider. So I've got 66 volts. Now the thing about that is, if you touch the live wire of 66 volts DC, you're not going to like it much. You have to watch out with DC, it's a lot more dangerous than AC actually. But to keep on track with what I'm telling you now, all you need to do is make sure that your controller is rated for a suitable input voltage. So if your controller is only rated at 60 volts maximum input, that's not going to be any good for you. If your controller is rated at 80 volts maximum input, in this example, you'll be fine. Well, that's it for this week, but join me next week for part 2, when there'll be plenty more chat, a look outside and a look at the controllers and all their associated gubbins. Until then, stay safe.